Broadcasting from Oklahoma, the tornado capital of the world, home of the Oklahoma City Thunder and the University of Oklahoma Sooners. This is the Curated Experience Show, a weekly podcast about the customer experience with viewpoints you will not hear anywhere else. And now your host, author, and customer experience expert, Amos Tanuma.
Welcome to the Curated Experience. I am your host, Amos Tanuma.
And Bob Furness. Bob, are you still with me?
Good morning, Amos.
Good morning. I'm glad it is Friday. Those of you who listen to us, we do these recordings on purpose on Friday so we can end our week talking about what we love and responding to some of your questions and talking to you folks out there. So I'm happy to make it to Friday and happy to get started. So Bob, today I thought we would focus on listeners' questions. And I do want to just say, we read every single email, suggestion, show notes that you send. I appreciate it. And I noticed it on the show hosting. It's just my email and, my stuff that's there. So I'm getting almost all of it. I got to change that so that it goes to Bob and I, and that will smooth things over. But I collate them, and Bob and I turn it into a show, and we bring it right back to you. So today, Bob, I have taken some questions. You didn't get a chance to see them, so this should be interesting. So I brought in some questions, and the conversations today is around learning. So let me start with the first group of questions. They were all around, there was one particularly from, I'm not going to mention your name, but there's a gentleman who's been managing contact centers for many years, and he's trying to advance his career. And one of the gaps he thinks he has is this idea of knowing more about the contact center, not just his role as managing people, but he has ambitions to run in all parts of the contact center. And his question is really around, how does he become like Bob Furness one day? How do I get as smart as Bob and know as much as Bob about the contact center? So how would you tackle that one?
That's a pretty low bar, dude. But how do you do that? So as a consultant, what I sometimes say is I learned by doing, and I've stepped in holes. And as a consultant, my job is to make sure that companies don't make those same mistakes. So the first thing is, don't be afraid to make mistakes. You sometimes become a leader because you made a mistake and you recovered well, and that's just the reality. I mean, we've shared some funny stories on here before about the mistakes that I've made.
Yep.
In the past. But I also believe that you've got to just want to learn something new. And one of the comments that I've made before, when I'm working I have a consulting office in my house upstairs, and as I'm walking down the stairs at night, I try to remember to ask myself, what did I learn today that no one can ever take away from me? And what I mean by that is, what did I learn today that I can use in the future? And so at the end of your day, when you're in the car and you're driving home, if you are wanting to learn, you must make time for learning. And so ask yourself that question. What did I learn today about the industry, or about customers, or about experience? What did I learn today that I can use in the future, whether I work for the company I'm working for or whether I work for some new company?
Right.
So that's one of the cornerstones of learning, is that you have to be on purpose about it.
Yeah. And so I want to pull on that thread a little bit. Talk about, there's a term a friend of mine uses. He calls it rivers of information, which I really love. And it's this idea that you want to learn something about this topic, in this case, contact center. So to this gentleman now, how have you, I'd love to hear from you, what are your rivers of information, to use that term? Like, where do you, in addition to that, like, where do you get your sources of information? How have you set it up? Is there a system, or does it just happen organically that you start to get information from all of these sources?
I think there's probably 2 or 3 things that I did when I was younger, or when I was growing up in the industry, that were cornerstones or important in that success of learning. One was I found ways to attend conferences. So there was a conference, there was an opportunity for me to be on a user board for what was at the time our telephony system. It was called Technicron, which eventually became eTalk, which I think eventually became Aspect. But I had an opportunity to be on the user board. Now, being on the user board, I had to be able to spin that in a way that it showed value to our company. And I knew the value to me would be that I would go hang out with 6 or 8 other users that were in the same industry I'm in, that had the same problems I had. And so look for those opportunities. If you have In Contact as your telephony system, or you have Avaya, or you
Right.
have Cisco, whatever you have, there are user boards that you can become a part of. All you need to do is raise your hand. So what that led to was the ability to speak at the ICMI conference, or they meshed together, those opportunities did. And so going to an ICMI conference, or to a CCNG conference, or whatever the SOCAP, finding the way to go to one of those conferences, what it does is it puts you in an environment to learn, but it also connects you to people in the industry. And I look back at it's how I met you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. Exactly
Was
right.
through conferences.
Yep.
So while conferences are different during COVID, we eventually will get back, I believe, to regular conferences. I'm not sure.
Well, I actually think that COVID might democratize this whole conference business, right? Because a lot of them are going virtual now, and eventually we'll be able to meet again. But I think they will always have a virtual element. They'll always have this idea. I think what will never leave is this idea of virtual conference. Or in other words, that conference that maybe they won't, your company wouldn't pay for you to go. I'm guessing in the future there will be a price for people who are flying to wherever this thing is, and then they'll just learn and get good at broadcasting this thing, so that if you are, maybe your entire management team can just sit on on a Zoom and experience it. And I'm gonna guess some of them might be free or to pretty inexpensive even after we get a vaccine. That's just my my guess on how this thing plays out. So that might improve the chances of folks to attend those things, I think.
Well, we also have. I mean, how many webinar invites do you get on a monthly basis?
Right.
So the thing about, I'm sure people know this, but the thing about webinars is, and they usually happen during the day, and you think, okay, well, there's no way I can just take an hour out of my day and just sit and listen. But if you sign up for them, the majority of them today, you get access to the webinar after the webinar if you don't attend the webinar, or access to the webinar. So now you've got a Saturday morning hour to sit back and learn. And typically you're looking for 2 things. You're looking for the ability in the contact center space. You're looking for the ability to understand a little bit more about the technology. Because I used to say, I didn't know how, I couldn't tell you how to program the voicemail system, or the IVR system, or the quality management system. But I learned enough about them to argue with the IT guy that it could do what I said I wanted it to do. So when you're in that webinar, you're looking for those little tidbits of how does the technology work, and how does that relate to other technologies in our organization? Because technologies are the tools that drive success in contact centers.
Right.
And then secondarily, you're looking for those tidbits of business knowledge, and you're wanting to make connections to other people in the industry, especially at live conferences. That when you walk in and you sit down, strike up a conversation with the person next to you. I just if I go through my online Rolodex of who I know in the industry,
Right.
almost in every case, I either had the opportunity to speak with them on a conference, I had the opportunity to meet them at a conference, I had the and by the way, full transparency, I realized a couple of weeks ago, I've been so busy in the last 4 months in this new role that I'm in.
Right.
I have not stopped to reach out to some of those folks. And there's a great book called Never Eat Alone by Keith Ferrazzi.
Yeah, I love that book.
That talks about that ability to stay connected. Who do you have on your voicemail? I mean, on your speed dial. So that's from the conference side. The second place is there are two organizations in this industry that, to me, there's just no reason for you not to be up on the latest if you're a manager or a supervisor. And one of them is Contact Center Pipeline,
right?
Which I believe that I've got a code. Let's talk about whether we can, when we post the show notes,
Yep.
Let's talk about whether there's an ability. I think I have an ability to
give people a digital
version for a year.
Yeah, let me know. Yeah, we'll put it up.
And if not, it's $26. It's not a lot of money for the digital version.
Right.
I don't know how much it is. That may have been an old number. But the second one is ICMI, because again, their weekly blog. What you're trying to do is you're trying to listen to what is out there and how does it relate to what you're doing. Right. So work at home. Holy crap, everybody had to work at home. So now what are we going to do about working at home? Well, I don't know. Well, let's go to Contact Center Pipeline. Let's log in and sign up, and let's get access to the last 3 or 4 or 5 years of articles on work from home before COVID, back when it was hard, right? And it wasn't cool.
Right.
So those are the places. There are some places that to me are my center point. If I want to understand what's going on in the industry, I read Contact Center Pipeline and ICMI.
Yeah, and I'll add, CCNG, Contact Center Networking Group. They have these free events. Used to be in person, post COVID. I think it's virtual, but yeah, the larger point is this is how you get smarter about the contact center. This is how Bob has done it. This is how I've done it, and many others. It's a combination of going to these pieces of knowledge, and when you get to those pieces of knowledge, there's always a human behind it, either on the stage speaking, writing this, and in this digital age, you can interact with them in person, digitally, and now you have, and then it's a force multiplier because now you get this network. Speak a little bit on, I wanted to pull on that. What about mentors? What role does informal and any of that? Can you talk a little bit of your experience on both ends and how it's helped you, whether mentoring and being mentored, and most of these tend to be informal, but talk about how that can help folks get deeper in this space.
Well, there have been times in my life when I've used formal mentors. I spent some back 5 or 10 years ago. I realized that I enjoyed speaking, and so I reached out to a mentor by the name of Doug Stevenson, who has he has a whole lot of different learning opportunities, but he has a weekend event where you can come out and and really spend three days focused on how do you become a better speaker. And then there's some mentorship beyond that. I've had people in my life when I was younger, like George Shaver was someone who said, you can do anything that you put your mind to, Bob, but you have to put your mind to it. And he was one that allowed me to make mistakes. And that's part of the mentorship process, is somebody that can help you after the mistake or in the middle of the mistake, or not just if your mentor is not pulling that thread of, hey, you can do better, then you did need a different mentor. I will also say that being a mentor oftentimes will teach you as much about who you are and who you should be as being mentored, because you see things through the eyes of someone else who's struggling with some of the same things that you struggled with, and it helps you cement your opinions by talking about them. I mean, this is a very cathartic, therapeutic 30-40 minutes I spend with you. And what'll happen is what'll happen, Amos, is we talk on these calls, and I realize that, okay, so that little tidbit that we just talked about, I can use that here the next time a customer asks me for something, or the next time a customer says X, I have an answer. And I'll find myself, this sounds ridiculously stupid, but I find myself quoting myself, or I find myself quoting you from one of these sessions. So think of a mentor environment from both sides of the fence, that not only are you helping someone else, but they're helping you by helping you cement that, yeah, this worked or this didn't work. I hadn't thought about that in a while. And then the last thing about mentorship is, if you're being mentored, I'm gonna challenge. If you're being mentored by somebody who's busy,
right?
If they told you that they wanted to mentor you and they get too busy, hold them accountable.
Yeah.
Right? So I've got somebody that I'm mentoring for a period of time, and we haven't talked in about 4 months. And that's probably my fault because I'm the mentor. But you know what? I'm so busy. If you'll just give me 3 times, I'll find a way to be on it. But I don't unfortunately haven't stopped enough time to find the time. Right?
Yeah.
So say to the person who you want to be your mentor, how often can we meet? And how do you want me to set these up? So push that mentor to be there for you. Because if she pushed me a little bit more, I would have found time.
Of course. Yeah. Like it's the accountability part. And I just want to pull on that. I mean, I think, you've got formal mentors and you've got this informal things. I think back to, it's 2007. I was working for Coca-Cola at the time, running a couple of contact centers. And I remember looking at you, and you were on these stages, and, I never formally said, hey, Bob, let me, at some point it became about just, in some cases, it's about watching, following, right? Like, and studying and asking questions. And it takes the pressure off sometimes. Just go to the person you're going, this person is doing this and I want to learn that. And you sometimes don't even need to put all of the pressure of these beings. Just be a human being to them and befriend them. And hopefully you connect on that way, and then just learn from each other in that way. And you'll pick up things sometimes just organically. And that's another way to do it. And this is how you get to this place in this business where you can appear to be the smartest guy in the room, and it's not that. It's just that you've put in the work and in studying and reading and connecting and networking. That's how you know more stuff. There's no secret club, right? There's no way of doing that. Let me shift gears just a little. There's another set of questions. So this one's interesting, Bob. So we're getting more and more questions about work at home, virtual, and I'm happy. It seems like people are figuring it out and they're having struggles. This question's around training, and it seems more around ongoing training than initial training. And it's really this idea that when all of these folks used to be in the building, they would gather them in a room, they'll force you to log out, they'll look at you, they'll ask you questions, they'll quiz you, they'll do all of that. And now we know that everyone now knows the latest and greatest thing about whatever widget or services we're selling. Now today, they're still having those meetings, but it's happening over Zoom or whatever your web conference of choice is. And her concern is that she doesn't think anyone's paying attention. And she's worried that this information is not getting out there, and she's already drawn a cause and effect because she's listening to calls, and it's clear that people are not, to her, that the source of this problem is this. She's saying she doesn't have the option of bringing them in. Do we have any tips to help her get more out of this virtual, I wouldn't call them training, update, ongoing on the job training? So I didn't have any good answers for her, so I thought, hey, Bob, what have you got?
So let me clarify. Is she worried? Is she the teacher, or is she the sharer?
She's the teacher.
Leader who's teaching.
Yeah, she's gathering her team. She's saying, hey, here's this new stuff that's happening. This is how you have to do X, Y, and Z now. And she's good at it from what I can get when it was brick and mortar. Now she's hitting this wall of doing it over deal, and she's just not getting the same impact. She feels like people are not, right? How do you police? Maybe you can. How do you police these web trainings, if you will?
Well, I think there's a reality for all of us that we pay more attention when we're on video than when we're not. So item number one is force video, right?
Right.
And people will say, so people will say, well, I'm not video worthy. Well, that's part of the job now. And for me, I wear a collared shirt the majority of now I may have on gym shorts with my dress collared shirt, but I started realizing that, showing up every day in my Pittsburgh Steeler shirt wasn't necessarily a business look. So expecting people to be on video might improve it. Of course, if I'm good at it, I can type while I look at the camera. Right. And just move just open up a different browser. But I think that you do it by implementing some of the online training capabilities into your meeting. So do you ask questions at the end? If I'm about to listen to my company's security update for the year, it's a 15-minute training, I will pay as little attention as possible in order to pass the test at the end. Right. Let's just be honest.
Right.
But to pass the test at the end means that I actually understood what was the most important 5 things about the information. Now, if that's where the bar is, I don't know whether that's a good bar for her. It's probably not. But spend some time learning how do people build online content training, and then incorporate some of that into your interactions. Even if all you're doing at the end is asking questions and calling out on people to answer them. You can't expect that people that are not standing around in a huddle or sitting in a conference room with you are going to listen at the same level online that they listen to you offline. But you can incorporate learning tools to improve their cognitive awareness of what you talked about. So,
right. And I would also say to you, over the long term, and this is true, and we covered this on the show. You can go back and listen to our show around working from home tips. There is a short-term plan and there's a long-term plan. I think at the heart of, some of what Bob was saying is, yes, there's some mitigating things in the short term, but over the long term, make sure your organization is adopting its tools, processes, and technology for your new environment, right? So training a bunch of people over WebEx and the tools you need to make sure they're learning, right? I bet you probably need a different set of tools versus, I think about my days as a supervisor manager. I literally printed, here's the new information, handed it to everyone. We went over this. I asked questions. I picked on the guy who wasn't paying attention. You got to figure out, how do I replicate all of that in a digital world? And part of that then involves different processes, different tools. And sometimes it's not a meeting. Sometimes it's some other tools. So, but in the short term, yeah, you take on some of those tips while you're thinking about, I really got to rethink this whole thing. And you're not alone. Every organization is trying to figure out, how do they manage, supervise people? And I hate to plug a old show, but really go in and listen to that show, and you'll get some short-term and long-term tips as well.
Well, and when we talked about that, Amos, we talked about, there is the initial, okay, everybody go home and work, and we'll figure it out, and we did. But now we're talking about the reality. I keep reading all the articles that, we're never going back to work. We're always going to be work from home. And I believe that's true to an extent. I believe there are certain types of jobs, and call centers seems to be a really good one. So now the reason why we didn't do work at home is because of technology issues or fear about HIPAA laws or whatever the reasons were that we gave to not do work from home. Now employees are working at home, so now we have to adapt. Right. So your idea of what kind of technology you're going to use, maybe you've never thought about online training before. Right. Well, how are you going to do that without an online training system?
Right.
So you're right. Beginning now to think about what does the future look like. I wrote an article for ICMI about that last month, that it's the next step now. We've been out here for 3 or 4 months. Now what are you going to do?
Yeah. So to end the show, I thought I would throw you a curveball. So of all of the many roles you've had in and around the contact center, right? If you think about, forget money, title, status, any of that kind of deal. This is a real question. It goes, his question is, what's the best job? And I'm interpreting that to mean, what's the funnest job in and around the contact center? If you had to work a job for the rest of your life in the contact center, what role will it be? Is it workforce management? Is it this? Like, what would it be? And I'll go first, because I've had some time to think about it, and you're just you're just now hearing it. And for me, it's a role that I didn't get to do, for very long. I think I did that role for like 5 minutes, but they had these roles in a contact center I worked in, and they called them coaches, which was very different than the soups. There were the supervisors who had all the, I didn't like that job. There was all this paperwork, and there was all this forms and writing people up and all of that crap. But then they had these coaches at this contact center I worked on. And their jobs were exactly that. Like, they worked for the supervisors, and they were the ones who went around, and someone needed help, they sat by them. They if they were good, they coached that person in whatever it is they were struggling. and then they got better. And I think if memory serves me well, it's been a long time ago. They ended up cutting those roles for budgetary reason. I wasn't higher up in an organization to understand the why. But my gosh, I think I remembered that job. I didn't have the job. I think at the time I had the supervisor job, and I always thought this coach guy has a better job than me. And that would be it. Like I could do that job and bring some of my analytical skills to it, and figure out how to help those people get better. And to me, it was a much better job than any management job I ever had. So, what will be your answer to Kevin's question?
Sort of a combination of what you talked about. I think being a coach would be a good job, but I have to be honest. I'm not sure that I want to be a quality coach, because now I'm expected to give you a score and tell you that you didn't do your job well. Right. I think back to the times I was a green frontline supervisor, and how in the middle of it I was learning so fast of how to manage people, and I was building relationships, and so that have some fond memories. Perhaps while in the middle of it I didn't have fond memories, but now I have fond memories. But I was a trainer for a while, and you got to bring new employees in. You got to be the first person that they trusted, trusted in the company. And the guy that I mentioned earlier as my mentor was George Shawver, and he was a trainer when I got brought into the first contact center I was ever in. And so I look back to the way he taught, the way that he coached, the way that he trained people, and wanted people to succeed. And I remember being a trainer in that same world, and I think I would probably go back and be a trainer. There's something special about training adults.
Yep.
Because especially somebody who wants a job, because they truly want to learn. It's not, sometimes you're in a training environment and the person on the other end is not excited about learning, but in that environment, they want to learn. They want to know who it is. They want to know what the answers are. So I think training would be it.
That's awesome. We didn't plan that, but you sort of rounded the show out well, because we've been talking about learning all along. So final thoughts. I want to thank our listeners. I am humbled by how many of you listen to us religiously, and it is a privilege for both of us. Keep the questions coming. We are thinking about ways to get to them even faster and respond and be more responsive to that. So thank you all for listening. And Bob, any parting words before I let you go for the weekend?
No, stop and read a book. Stop and read a book.
Well,
that's my only one.
It's awesome. Have a great day, guys. We will talk soon.
Thanks.
And until next time, remember, the experience is either random or intentionally curated. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to The Curated Experience with Amos Tanuma. If you like what you just heard, we hope you'll join the conversation online by visiting us at curatedcx.com or at amostanuma.com. That's curatedcx.com or AMASTENUMAH.com. And please invite your friends and colleagues to visit our website or iTunes, where they can check this and previous podcasts. This has been a Bien LLC production. Check us next time for another edition of The Curated Experience.